Well, welcome back. And we were all ready to begin our second session for today, where we're discussing how property management and facility management fit together. Now, this panel will delve deeper into the interaction between these two disciplines and what value that they could bring to the client on a strategic level. Before we start the discussion, I would like to introduce the panel to all of you, starting with Ms. Anastasia Al-Khatib, the Associate FM Consultancy and Property and Asset Management Services, UAE from JLL. Now, Ms. Anastasia brings with her over 8 years of experience working on projects in the Middle East, and she has worked in the capacity of an Associate FM Consultancy at JLL and prides herself on working on the biggest projects in the UAE and the Middle East. Also joining us on this panel is Mr. Ahmed Talaat, the MD of Casapedia Real Estate. Mr. Ahmed brings with him over 25 years of regional experience in the multi-real estate disciplines. He established Casapedia in 2017, which is a boutique real estate company offering multi-services to corporate institutional investors as well as individuals, such as development services, property management, sales, marketing, and advisory services. Also on this panel is Mr. Mike Moore, the VP FM from Bhavani International. A dedicated FM professional with over 40 years of experience has recently joined Bhavani DFM to head up their facilities management division. Part of the renowned Bhavani Holding, they self-deliver integrated FM solutions as well as FM consultancy and transition management services. And also joining us on this panel is Mr. Imtiyaz Ansari, the Operations Director of BK Gulf Facilities Management. He has over 15 years of a proven track record of operational process improvement and successfully and efficient service delivery in the UAE. Given the skills and a methodological approach to service delivery in line with contractual and statutory requirements, he has been successfully managing contracts with over commercial, retail, and residential industries within the UAE. And he has demonstrated his ability to be adaptable to his client and the environment. And last but not the least, we have Ms. Lindsay McQuillan, the Director, Head of Property and Asset Management from CBRE, Property Management, Middle East Region. She has acted for a diverse range of corporate clients, advising them in all aspects of commercial property. Lindsay has provided key advice to her clients on repurposing strategy to assist portfolio diversification in line with evolving market and consumer trends. So viewers, please note that you can post in your questions in the chat box and our panel will address them during the course of the discussion. We do have an event feed on the main page where we can take the discussion there post the session. Over to you, Ms. Lindsay.
Thank you very much, Mega, and welcome everyone. As Mega said, we will take any questions and we will keep them until the end of the session. But if anybody has any questions, please post them in the chat box and we will do our very best to answer as many of them as possible at the end of the session. So we're here today to discuss how property and facilities management, how they fit together. So I think firstly, I'd like to kick off by asking Mike, what do you see are the fundamental differences between property and facilities management? I think defining them is a very important aspect.
It's a great question, Lindsay. And I often think that in many ways, property management are the thinkers and facilities managers are the doers in some respects. That said, there continues to be a blurred line between the two disciplines, and particularly in smaller organizations, the FM function tends to also take the bottom end of the property management requirements, and in some respects, in some instances, the property managers sort of dip into the FM pool. But if you think about it from another perspective, the property management function is to advise the client. Again, kind of a little bit of a blurred line into the asset management function. The property managers advise the client how to maximize return on investment, how to maximize rental income, things like that. There's a sort of quasi-legal aspect to the job, preparing leases, preparing contracts, Often they will issue the invoices and collect the cash. And that in some respects is my perception of the property management function. The facilities management function is a lot more basic. It's a lot more, in many respects, physical. It's a maintenance function. We'll do the soft services, cleaning, pest control, waste management, things like that. And the hard services, where it's straightforward MEP maintenance, and then specialist contract maintenance like elevators, water testing, Legionella testing, BMS, and other low voltage systems. So that's the kind of distinction, that's the kind of silos, but there does seem to be this blurred line between the two. And in many respects, the blurred line is almost a new discipline now, community management, which takes in aspects of both disciplines, or perhaps fills the gap between the two disciplines. That's the way I see it.
Do you think, Mike, that the blurred line is specific to this region, or do you think this is globally that we see this blurred line between services?
I don't think it's this region. I think it is globally. I think if there are any other grey heads on this call, you may remember, going back a long time, there was a totally different discipline called estate management. And estate management, there was no facilities management, there was no property management. Portfolios, estates had an estate manager and an estate management function. And that is now what we see as the blurred line, which is basically covering all the aspects of the property portfolio, whatever was required, whether it was maintaining a property or sending the invoices out to the tenants. And it seems to be kind of heading back towards that in some respects, which is quite a strange phenomenon. I say today we might call it community management, but it's very, very similar from my take from what used to be known as estate management. And it's definitely not just this region. And again, we all know things have been very tough. Finances are hard, and there's more and more of a tendency to try and shrink expenditure. And this is where the blurred line comes in, because people are having to do more now than ever. So whereas you might have had two separate functions, now they're trying to contain it into one, just to save money in some respects.
Yes, indeed. Anastasia, what are your thoughts on the differences between property and facilities management? Do you agree with Mike? Is your view the same?
In some respects, yes, but probably I can view it in a little bit different perspective. So to me, Mike was correctly on point to mention that property management are responsible for leases, responsible for kind of a portion of asset management. I do see that currently it follows the strategic triangle, if we call it that way. At the top sits the asset management, then we have property management and facilities management. I believe nowadays property and facilities management should also come under the umbrella of the asset management, but they look at different perspectives of the operations of the facilities. Kind of the property management, how I see it, sits on top of the facilities management. So they should be kind of the client representative, and they should be or could be the sole client representative that cascades down the operation requirements to the facilities management. So you have that one point of contact, which makes it quite easier for the client to work in the environment. So definitely there is a blurred line between them, and it definitely varies between one client to another, or one project to another. And it also varies in the understanding between different companies. Some companies have a definitive kind of roles and responsibilities for FM, but potentially other companies they extend more into the property management or vice versa. Mike was correct when he mentioned that some of the kind of basic facility management companies also do parts of property management. And it's quite kind of, to be honest, challenging in the market I do believe it stems from the fact that not everyone agrees on what should be facility management and what should be property management. And I would kind of give a question to everyone. If you are in a building and something broke down, who do you contact to let know of the breakage? Do you contact the property management or the facility management? And it really depends on how you assign roles and responsibilities between both.
Thank you, Anastasia. Yes, I think you're absolutely right. And your question is a very fair one to ask people, who do you contact? Because I imagine 50% of people would say they would contact the property manager, and 50% of people would say they'd contact the facilities manager. So it's how the roles and responsibilities are defined. And then more importantly, defined between potentially two companies doing the services, or how are they perceived then by the end consumer? So the tenants of the buildings, are they aware of the difference between the roles and responsibilities of potentially a property manager and a facilities manager? And often there's some confusion there. And I think that brings us back to what we're actually talking about today, the importance and how property and facilities management, how they do fit together, and the purpose of the functions sitting hand in hand. Mike, an interesting point you made about often these are cost driven. Imtiyaz, do you agree with that's what the market is moving to, a joint approach based on cost? Do you agree with that?
Yes, I fully agree with that. Given the last 2 years and the current pandemic situation, everything revolves around costs right now. It's a challenge for the property management division, challenge for facilities management as well. If you consider most of the owners, building owners, are now cost driven. Yes, quality is of prime importance, but cost is a major factor as of now. If you see, right now, every client is focused on how they're going to reduce costs, given the fact that the occupancy rates have gone down in this region during this pandemic. So I completely agree with that.
And do you think that leads to any issues in respect of potentially people without the correct skill sets being asked to do things that they're maybe not qualified to do, for example? Do you think that can often happen?
Yes, if the focus is on reduction of costs, you're going to cut corners. And if you're going to cut corners, the end user is suffering at the end of it. So you tend to get the wrong talent on board, or if you have the right talent and you start getting the kind of remuneration he's supposed to get at the end of it. That is a challenge that is being faced currently with most of the FM providers at this point of time, in my opinion.
Yeah, because I can see issues arising if people without the right technical skill sets are being asked or expected to do certain things which they're not potentially qualified to do. I can see that being an issue.
Yes, that is an issue, but if you look at a long-term strategy, it's not going to go a long way. Cost is a major factor, but you need to ensure your buildings are healthy. You need to ensure you have the right talent on board, and you need to ensure that your assets are maintained well. At the end of it, the facilities management is solely responsible to ensure the assets are well maintained. You increase the life cycle of the assets, and to do that, you got to spend. And I believe that's the major disconnect between property management and facilities management. For property management, it's completely revenue driven. You get the contracts in, you get the leases in, you get the end user in. But at the end of the day, they've got to ensure that you get the revenue in, and that's where the disconnect comes in. And this trend I see is in the last 2 years during the pandemic. Having said what I've said, I also know many clients, many end users who are very much focused on ensuring that they do not compromise on these costs. It's a challenging time, and I'm sure this region will come out of it sooner than expected.
Hopefully, Ahmed, what are your thoughts on the topic specifically, particularly about cost and clients' willingness to spend money to potentially have both service lines sitting hand in hand? Sorry, Ahmed, you're on mute.
I think that we can all notice that the facility management and the property management budget has been actually hit hard recently because of the last 2 years COVID situation. And to be honest, it doesn't need an expert to notice that the cost in terms or the facilities that we guys are seeing in each building or the mall that we are going in or a restaurant or even our workplace, the technology that being used at the moment, the gears, the materials, the hygienic products that available in each and every corner, this has actually affected the budget big. And everyone now is trying to act as lean as they can. So it's really difficult now. We are still learning. The new normal is new for everyone. We are all trying, and it's a learning curve, to be honest. I don't think that this will end soon, or I think it might be actually this is a permanent thing to have such technology and such gears in the places that we go to, and eventually this contributed to a hefty bill to the landlords and owner. And so it depends on the way that we look at it.
Yes, indeed. And I think, you know, another large factor of this period that we have been through is technology as well, and the importance of technology within buildings and how technology fits also with property and facilities management to make us all more efficient in our day-to-day roles, whether we are property managers, facilities managers, asset managers. I think technology will play a massive part in the future as well.
Yeah, I think the property management was, or the budget or the financial impact on the property management was less than the facility management, because all you need in the property management is to just tweak the technology, some adjustment here and there, because, you know, the property management doesn't need that physical interaction. It's more of virtual and online. However, if we look at the facility management, you are dealing with people on a daily basis. So the person who is dealing actually with the owners or tenants needs to be geared up in order to have such interaction, and eventually this impacted the budget big time.
Yes, indeed. Indeed. Mike, maybe you would tell us, you know, some of the benefits that you see of property managers and facilities managers working side by side. What benefit do you see to our clients of these functions working together?
Okay, another great question. I think, to be honest, given the pandemic, given the new normal, given the financial constraints we're all working under, it's more essential than ever that the two disciplines work very closely together. If there's a disconnect, I mean, think of it like your body, your brain and your body. Your brain controls what your body does. If there's a disconnect, nothing works. The body's useless on its own. The brain is useless on its own. If you put the two together and connect them well, fabulous, fantastic, God's creation. And the two functions working together is very similar. If we work together and we work in harmony, synergy, then the results can be spectacular. If we try and work independently, we'll both do a bad job, frankly speaking. I had a conversation with Mega a few months ago and said, in many respects, the best thing that ever happened to the FM industry is the pandemic. Why? Because we've started to be seen as professionals. We started to be seen as the people who can really make a difference. But we've got to be allowed to make that difference. Our voice has got to be heard. We have to be consulted, and we have to be allowed to use our expertise. And as Anastasia said, we're the service department for the property managers. They have to open that door for us, open the door of communication and trust, and to allow the two disciplines to work together to achieve a much better result at the end of the day for the end users. And if the two disciplines can and will work together, the results can be spectacular.
And why specifically do you think the pandemic has elevated the voice of the property manager? Explain that. Explain how
the facilities
manager.
The facilities manager.
Yeah.
No disrespect to the property managers above us, but it's been a very tough time. We've had to look at how we can cut costs. We've had to look at how we can make best use of the buildings that we have. Health and safety, of course, cleaning standards, even the maintenance regimes, the type of HEPA filters we have in FAHUs, as an example, the amount of sterilization that we do. All of these things are just day-to-day FM functions that people didn't even know existed. But now they're in the spotlight. Everybody's thinking, oh my God, has somebody cleaned that door handle? Oh my God, is there any sterilizer for my hands? How long ago has this AHU filter been cleaned? It suddenly brought it all into the spotlight. And this is our bread and butter. And when a facilities manager is allowed to manage the facility, then they can do great things. They really can. And as I say, the challenges that have come out of this pandemic have made people realize that we're there, and made people realize that if we're allowed to, we can make a big difference to them and save their lives.
Actually, if you think about it as well, during the pandemic, it was the facilities managers that clients were reliant on to be able to reopen the buildings. If there were COVID cases within the buildings, they had to manage that process. So they were the linchpin in respect of reopening the building. The reliance was on the facilities managers and not the property managers, respectfully.
Not at all. No, you're right. I mean, you know, when the going gets tough, the tough get going. And we talked about when there's a repair, who do people talk to, property manager or facilities managers? And, you know, 50-50, fine. But what we noticed with the pandemic is he went straight to the people who could make a real difference. The guy who's holding the mop, the guy who has a rag to clean the door handle, the guy who can organize things. You're right about the return to work, but even during the sort of half working at home, half working in the office, organizing the rotas, who's going to work where, making sure the meeting rooms weren't overpopulated, even setting people up to work from home, it all fell onto the facilities manager to organize all of that. And I say it's a terrible thing that's happened, but if anything good has come out of it, it's been quite good for the FM industry. It's really elevated our status, in my opinion.
And certainly as well in respect of working from home, not as easy for facilities managers to be able to work from home. So they've very much been at the coalface, still in the buildings, making sure they could open them when they need to and keeping those essential services within the buildings operating. So yeah, Anastasia, maybe you could tell us what are your thoughts on this subject?
I fully agree with Mike, to be honest, on everything he mentioned. I'm personally a facility manager, and I kind of respect what we do. To us, I think the facilities managers who were in the buildings and the facilities during the pandemic, while everyone was at home, they are for us as the frontliners, because they were making sure that our facilities are safe for us to be there. There's also another aspect to how the importance of FM has grew during the pandemic. We know that everything has expedited during the pandemic. The technology, the virtual tools that we use to communicate nowadays, but there was a rise as well to the importance of the digital transformation for properties and being able to monitor and control buildings from afar. So in order to reduce the physical man hours within the buildings. So we had a lot of requests for clients asking, how can we digitally proof our buildings? How can we access and probably monitor or kind of work with our facilities from afar? And that's what's happening in the moment. But we need to also keep in mind that digital transformation is not only about how we monitor and how we monitor the physical buildings, but also how can this building during the pandemic be flexible enough to adapt to human requirements. So it's not only installing kind of IoTs and sensors, but it's also kind of thinking and building that intellectual platform that would learn from the patterns of a human use in the building. And it could probably, for instance, for the lift, the platform, the digital platform would know how many people are in that, let's say, commercial building, and it will adjust the speed of the lift as per the number of visitors and where they need to go in order to maintain social distance and also to kind of increase the energy efficiency and increase the floor efficiency. So there are a lot of things that are happening at the moment which have expedited probably 10 times as compared to before the pandemic, which is definitely where we need to be.
Ahmed, sorry, what are your thoughts?
Actually, I would like to go back to the questions in regards to the property owners benefit, or the facility management and the property manager when they work together. Because honestly, I have another opinion, and I know that some of my facility managers friends might not be happy with the answer, because honestly I don't see this is an option that they should work together, and in a way I feel that the facility manager should report or even hired by the property manager, and this is for full control on the process, and then both should agree on the KPIs that serve the business. This is the only way that see the business going to the right track. Otherwise, you will, if you don't have such synergy, or they don't work together, or each has their own way of doing business and both reports to different people, things definitely will go wrong. This is, I know it might not be accepted by people or by facility managers, but this is the way I see it, that it should.
So you specifically think that the property manager should be responsible for tendering for the facilities management contract within the building specifically, and the facilities management function should then answer to the property manager within the building? Yeah,
this is the way I see it.
Okay.
Can I respond, please? Have any thoughts? Yes, of course, yes.
I agree. I agree. I absolutely agree with them 100%. I mentioned earlier on, the FM is a support department, and it's a service department. And I completely agree. I think this triangle, strategic triangle, I think Anastasia mentioned earlier on, asset management, property management, FM, that's absolutely right. And that's absolutely the way it has to be. My analogy, the thinkers and the doers, the brain and the body. I'm not the brain, that's the property manager's guy. He needs to direct us and set the strategy, and we'll follow. That's our role. Now, aspects, the sort of technical aspects of FM, yes, we might need to develop a strategy. I appreciate that. But it has to, absolutely has to, complement and align with the overall property strategy, property management strategy. 100% agree with Ahmed. It's my opinion.
Imtiyaz, do you think the same thing, or do you have a differing opinion?
Slightly different. How I see it is that most of the facilities management service providers are working in tandem with the property or asset management companies. If you see your contracts are driven based on the requirement of the property management or asset management company. So SLA, KPIs, everything revolves around that. If you look at priority timelines, you look at penalty clauses, everything is around the contract that is derived from close consultation and working together with the property management. So there's a slight difference in what I think about how it works. So the contracts are, we are the doers, like Mike said, we are the doers. The thinkers are the people who put the contract in place. The doers and the thinkers mutually agree and get the work done. So that's the way I look at it.
And do you think property managers are best placed to measure the KPIs of the facilities managers? How would that work in a technical environment?
See, again, if the KPIs are mutually agreed and the facilities managers are aware of what their deliverables are, I think it's a perfect fit to go ahead with that. Month on month, performances are evaluated. Month on month, processes, if you may, are put in place and ensure that the defined processes are working in tandem with both parties, and that's the way I look at it.
And just another question, conflicts, when do you see the conflicts would arise between property and facilities managers? What would be the main reason for conflict?
In my opinion, the conflict comes in when it's all about the money, the revenue. If you've got to get your budget slashed, and property managers are they keep the budgets quite tight, and facilities managers are the ones that actually go and do the work on ground, and you've got to do some service repairs and maintenance, and you got to spend. That's the conflict that comes in when you start talking about expenditure. So that's one of the main reasons where I see conflicts coming in.
Yeah.
I would be concerned as well if the property managers are responsible for the KPIs, if the financial impact, if a facilities manager doesn't meet their KPIs, then inevitably they will likely blame the property manager in some shape or form. Do you think that's fair, Mike?
Yeah, I think I agree with Imtiyaz. It's ultimately all about the money, and the money often is tight, so resources are tight, so it can be difficult to deliver. If the KPIs are well designed, if they are smart, and if they are quantitative wherever possible as opposed to qualitative, then it's a fact. You've either done it or you haven't. Yes or no. It's a binary sort of decision, which helps a lot. There can be conflict. There can be the blame game. Well, it's not my fault. You cut the budget, whatever. There can be that conflict. And I think the essential thing, again, as Imtiyaz said, that the KPIs are agreed between the two disciplines. They have to be smart, which means that they're fair, achievable, realistic. And if the budgets have to be cut back because of the pandemic or for whatever reason, they should be reassessed, reevaluated. The new normal applies to KPIs as well. We were where we were, we are where we are. The KPIs need to change. We might not be able to give a 1 hour response anymore. It might need to be 4 hours because we haven't got the resources or the people aren't physically inside the building. We can't ignore these facts. We can't recognize that the world has changed, but then apply KPIs, which were developed 3 years ago. It's just not going to work. So I think that the key is to continue to work together, recognize that both disciplines are there for the end user, to get the best results possible for the end users. And if they work together and willing to compromise, it can be fine.
Ahmed, we turn to you.
Yeah, actually, I want to talk about the conflict because, again, this is related very much to my previous comment on the reporting line, because the conflicts between them definitely will occur, especially when there is no understanding to the overall objectives or the agreed KPI. And I will give here an example. The property manager is looking at ways of reducing the cost, operating the building efficiently, maybe by adjusting the AC operating hours, or turning light off, or changing consumables or materials. On the other hand, you will find the facility manager is getting direct orders from the tenants. It's too hot, it's too cold, no power. So eventually he will resort to operate the AC longer than currently scheduled. And here is the conflict happens because of the KPI that, or not the KPI actually, the overall objective that facility manager might have not understood from the early beginning, but you'll end up by having like 3 losses and 1 win. Customer is happy because he got the AC working really fine, and you have an angry landlord, and eventually you will have conflicts between 2 parties that might escalate down the line, and all will be not for the benefit of the landlord and the asset that they are serving.
Do you think that facilities managers and property managers should both equally be reporting to the client, or should the facilities manager report to the property manager, and then the property manager's responsibility is then to report to the owner or the client?
I think that the owner doesn't need such hassle. He needs someone or one party or one entity to deal with. So he doesn't need to sit with the facility manager, and then the facility managers tell him that, well, this is the problem of the property manager, and the property manager tells him this is the problem of the facility manager. So I think you need to talk to one entity, which eventually looks after the main function, which is again property manager, as well as the facility management as reporting and agreed KPI.
And do you think it's possible for one firm to carry out both functions? So as we know, there's firms in this region that have multi sectors within their business. Do you think that's a good idea, or is it better to separate the service lines completely?
I think it's better to separate it, so to avoid any conflict of interest. This would not be for the benefit of the business. Again, I mean, you cannot have all the expertise in one entity. You cannot have the design, the operation, the facility management, and the rest of the real estate cycle, and then you claim that you are an expert. It doesn't work that way. Otherwise, you can be a developer and you have the whole functions and the entire real estate cycle. So I don't think it's appropriate to have the facility management and the property management in one company.
Anastasia, what are your thoughts on conflict, when conflict arises the most?
Good point, to be honest. I think probably it stems when the roles and responsibilities are not clear and not well defined between both. Sometimes the responsibilities of the FM overlap into the PM or otherwise. And when there's a blurred line between the responsibilities, everyone tries to blame the other for not doing the thing. That's where I think there's kind of a problem between the properties management and facilities management. But if I may go back to the point just Ahmed mentioned on whether companies need to be kind of specialized in one thing, yes and no. There are instances where if you have one entity that's properly specialized in the property management and have a different division that's specialized in the facilities management, they could probably do that, and that could achieve some cost efficiency to the client. And at the same time, they wouldn't be fighting between each other as a property management and facility management, because they would be working as a one entity kind of more efficiently. They would be more used to the kind of ways of working, and they would know the procedures better if it's all coming from one, let's say, entity, a bigger entity that has a kind of a proper delineation between property and facilities management. Also, there is the other fact that probably you wouldn't find that not too many players in the market who have that speciality in both. That's true. If they're not kind of specialists in both, please don't go to them. Go to the specialists of facility and property management. In most of the cases, the companies that have great capabilities in FM and property management, they do FM management rather than straight delivery of the facilities management. So they would manage the service providers, but the property management team would have a facility management on board in order to be able to manage the service provider and as you rightly mentioned, manage those KPIs and SLAs, because a property management, a solely property manager might not really understand the technicalities of the facility management service provision. That's why you need a facility manager in your team as a property management.
Thank you, Anastasia. I think it's such an interesting topic. Anastasia, I'm going to stay with you and ask you about construction, the construction stage, and do you believe there's any point or merit in introducing facilities management at the early stages of construction, and if so, why? Why do you think?
Thank you for this question. I could probably go on and and just about this topic. It's my favorite topic, but my background is civil engineering, so I came from construction to facilities management. So I really love it. Basically, this topic has been going around between the FM professionals for quite some time, especially when we have projects such as design and build or design and build and operate, or when the design of the project is going at the same time as the construction, or there is a very small lag between them. So it's happening very quickly. We often see that the requirements of the FM are compromised because one, there is time associated with that. We have to complete everything in a very kind of small time frame. Also, the client wants to achieve cost efficiency. That's why they are going for design and build or design, build and operate. And it especially is applicable to infrastructure projects, mega projects. When you don't have a facility management on board, making sure that your design is operable and that you have taken into consideration all the design, the operational aspects into your design will not be functional. I have been into mega infrastructure projects which were kind of standard as a design and build projects, and found out that actually the electrical rooms were totally unsafe. It is just unsafe to manage and operate that building because there were no safe distances between the distribution boards and kind of the back of the room. There were instances where critical assets are installed quite very high up the ceiling, and below that multiple layers of other assets and trays of electricity and cables and ICT systems and all of that. And you actually cannot reach those systems to maintain them properly. So what you're left to do is that you leave those assets to run until they fail. And then you would have to kind of remove all those layers of assets beneath that in order to replace that unit. And that's a huge business disruption, which causes millions for some infrastructure projects. So yes, I totally believe that we need to be there during construction, before construction, during design stage, and during construction, depending on the type of the contract.
Anyone else? Is your view the same as Anastasia or different?
I agree with Anastasia, what she says.
Yeah.
If you see in the long run, if you have the property management and PFM divisions there, and you can make sure that the assets, the life cycle of the assets is enhanced. You can make sure that if there is any defect and liability at that point of time, you can have it corrected. You can make sure that you even increase revenue by ensuring that you don't go for modifications when the asset is handed over. So I completely agree with Anastasia on what she said. So if we are there, you can handle the assets better.
Mike, do you also agree?
Yeah, absolutely, 100%. I've been doing FM design reviews for too long, far too long, and yes, we have a saying in the UK: "Marry in haste, repent at leisure," and it's a little bit like with a project. If you don't involve FM, you're going to suffer for a very long time. As part of the FM design review service that we do, we don't set out to make savings, but we always find savings, whole life savings. And Anastasia gave some really good examples of the impracticality of buildings that haven't had FM input during the design stage. And she's very passionate about it. So am I. We could have a really long talk about this and put all our cards on the table, the horror shows that we've seen during design. And some of the whole life savings are immense, as in immense. I did a job about a year ago, and we demonstrated that by following the recommendations we've made, over the life of the building, they could save 900 million reals. We demonstrated it scientifically, if you like. It wasn't just a finger in the air. We demonstrated they could save almost 1 billion reals. This is the impact that we can make if we're allowed to come in during design stage. We should then be retained through the construction stage to make sure that they don't value engineer out the recommendations that we've made. And then it drifts into transition management to make sure that the buildings are ready to go. Whoever's operating them, they'll need certain things. It's fairly generic. And the transition management service makes sure that that's in place so that it can get off to a good start. It's not an embarrassment where the developer opens the door, all the VIPs run in, oh, and there's no toilet roll. Disaster. It's happened. It happens again and again. And this is the kind of silly little thing which can badly damage an organization for a very long time unless it's managed effectively by the facilities manager.
And Mike, what do you think are the hurdles to being involved at this early stage? Again, cost.
Not wanting to flog a dead horse, but yes, people see the cost. They don't see there's a need to spend more money. They typically say, well, the architect will do that. The engineer will do that. Well, newsflash, they won't. They also don't realize that this is an investment which will get a huge return. I mentioned earlier on, I won't tell you what our fee was, but let me tell you, it was a fraction of 1% of the savings that we find for these people. The other main obstacle is ego. The ego of the design team who think they're doing a fantastic job, and he's only an FM. What does he know? I worked with Frank Geary on a very prestigious building, very unique building, and we queried how they would access to the roof. And their answer in writing was, and I quote, lower a man from a helicopter. That was their response. And they're one of the leading firms of architects in the world. And I'm sure they deserve that accolade, but they don't know FM. They don't know how to operate a building. Just like I can't design a building from scratch. The two disciplines need to work together to get a fabulous result. Property managers and FMs, we work together, we'll get a fabulous result.
Great. We're coming up to our last 10 minutes, so I'm going to, I've got some questions and some comments from the public, so I'll maybe run through those now before we finish. The first one is more of a comment, and maybe Ahmed, you can tell me if you agree or not, that it's up to us as leaders within the industry to educate clients and educate people, because the market here isn't mature enough. Do you agree? Do you agree with that? Is it up to us to educate clients?
Well, actually, I agree with part of the question. Yes, we actually we are one of the parties or the entities that need to educate the public. However, I don't think that the market is mature enough. Let's admit it. I mean, it's the first freehold apartment has been sold 20 years back. RERA department established back in 2007. So it's not a mature industry per se. However, we achieved a lot in a very brief time, but people still need to learn about property management and facility management, because still till date we have confusion and people are mixing up, and I wouldn't blame it on them. I would blame it on the amount of knowledge that they are getting.
Imtiyaz, do you agree?
Partially, yes. The last 2 decades, where we started from, we are a growing market. We have come a long way, and yes, we need to educate our clients. We need to educate even our end users of where we are moving forward. So I completely agree with that.
And how do we do that? How do we educate the end users?
See, if you see, given the presence of social media, given the presence of what we have in our hands, a phone, you have Google, you have YouTube. So your end users are very much educated. They know what's happening around the world. It's our technical capabilities and our expertise that we bring on board. That's when we go back and we educate our end users in what we need to do. If let me give you an example. If you need to do a design change, you do your homework, you go back, you sit with your client and explain to him. I go back to what Mike had said, with regards to FM being children of a lesser God. So you need to go back and work with the construction aspect of it. We are not champions at that, but we are champions in what we do. So that's how I look at it.
Yeah, I often think that people don't look far enough into the future. They're only looking at 2, 3, 5 years, as opposed to we should be looking at 15, 30, 50 years into the future. The life cycle of the buildings, per se, not just a couple of years into the future. I think that has a massive impact. The mindset of people.
Let's say here, I want to add, apart from the mindset of the people, when you talk about the life cycle of the assets or life cycle of the building, how I look at it is, when you keep changing hands in terms of the service aspect for those assets. If you see in this region, most contracts are for anything between 3 to 4 years and 6 years, and then boom, you have another service provider there. So you have hands changing. I look at it, if you have a long-term, service provider and FM provider, if you may, and he knows the building well, you can then look at the long-term strategy of 15 years, 20 years, 3 years, like you said. So you have different workmanship, if you may, if you understand where I'm coming from. So people come in with different expertise. They work on that asset 4 years, 5 years, they move out. You have another provider come in, work for another 4, 5 years, move out. So that asset is going through multiple hands. And that's something that I see in this region that we need to make a change towards. You have better records, you can manage that asset better. Life cycle, like we all say, life cycle management. A life cycle management, an HVAC unit, 15 years, as per PM standards, maximum 20 years. If you really want to take it another 5, 10 years, and you have a particular service provider handling that asset, you can reach that, rather than having 2 or 3 different hands working on it. That's how I look at it.
Thank you. Another question, what do we all think we believe are good practices to help property managers and facilities managers work together? My view is it's very simple. It's effective communication, but what does anyone else think?
Working towards the same goal, same objective. Sorry, Mike, you were saying something.
No, just saying, Lindsay asked the question, no one was communicating.
No, I said communication and no one communicates.
Exactly. But I'm sorry to cut across your Imtiyaz, but Lindsay, you read my mind. I was going to say that there's only one tool that you need in that box, and that's communication. Good, effective communication. If you have that, everything else will happen some way or another.
Again, we have another more of a statement than a question, but someone has said that the issue in smaller projects is that the facilities manager plays the role of the educator to the client, and then as educator becoming, you know, the PM, the OA, or the owner himself. Whereas on large projects, you know, there's a good, you know, strong, large asset management team, which makes the FM's life easier. Do you think that's fair, a fair comment for smaller projects? Do you see that in the market?
Who are you addressing that to, Lindsay?
Maybe Ahmed, maybe.
I didn't get it clearly, to be honest, the comment.
Yeah,
what exactly?
I think this person thinks that on smaller projects that the facilities manager plays more of an overarching role because the project is small, so they've got multiple hats, whereas on larger projects there are specific people in specific roles. Do you think that's fair? Fair comment?
Well, actually, I think definitely. I mean, it depends on the scale of the project. But let me just go back to very important fact till date here in Dubai. And I'm sure that you guys have all witnessed it and see it, that some of the old school owners and landlords are having one person managing their own multi-millions building. You might even have the janitor is managing the building, the cleaning, the maintenance, and everything, which eventually will lead to disasters. So going back to the gentleman comment, if this facility manager can wear the hats and can achieve, I'm talking about the small scale projects, I'm not talking about the big size project. If he can wear the hats and manage it correctly, though I don't really recommend property manager has activities that he can make the facility management or facility manager can't, and the opposite. So I'm not actually in favor of having such wearing hats or handling the same both activities, because eventually this will be not in the favor of the landlord at the end of the day.
And I think what's very important is that people know what's within their remit or within their skill sets, and they don't take on jobs that they really shouldn't be doing, or they're not qualified or trained to do. I think that's very important.
It is very important, Lindsay, and I think, excuse me, the point that the caller made is absolutely right. On the smaller projects, you have to wear more than one hat because that's all the project can stand. We talked earlier on about, is there a danger? Yes, there is. Whether it's at a technical level where the plumber is trying to fix electrics, or at a management level where the facilities manager is playing up being a property manager, and vice versa. There is a danger to the client ultimately, but as an astute businessman, I'm sure, or woman, I'm sure they've assessed the risk and decided that yes, the risk is worth it. You'd like to think so. Have they done that in reality? Probably not. Anastasia made a very good point earlier on about conflict coming from a lack of understanding of roles and responsibilities. Now, if you're that janitor who has to manage the building, everything's down to you, it's clear. Everything's down to you, very clear. But once we start to granularize it a little bit and have specialisms, it is super important that people know where they stop and start, and they do know their own limitations. But again, what I've experienced over here is people get bullied into going beyond their actual skill levels. Oh, well, you can do that. Oh, it's fine. You'll be fine. Yes, of course you can. You will do it or you'll be fired. There is that little bit of a culture over here. And that sometimes pushes the issue and forces us all as individuals to leave our comfort zone, really, right, to make decisions that we're not qualified to make.
Yeah, indeed. And the answer is always, yes, I can, as opposed to no, I can't. And actually, I should involve a facilities manager, or I need to involve a property manager. Sometimes people don't want to say no. And therefore they get themselves into a tricky position that perhaps they're doing things that they're not even insured or licensed to do. So it's sometimes learning to say no, which can often be very difficult depending on who you're dealing with. I think that wraps up an hour of our session talking about how property and facilities management fit together. Thank you very much, everyone, for tuning in, and I hope we all gave you a better understanding of our views on how we think the two functions should fit together. Not that they always do, as we've discussed. So I hope everyone has found it useful. So thank you, everyone.
Thank you, Lindsay. Thank you, panel. Thank you.
Thank you, Mike.
Thank you.
Bye.
Thank you.
Bye.
Bye.
Bye-bye.